Define higher incomes. I mean, if we're talking about, let me be really clear.
Define what you know
Yeah.
it is.
So if you were looking at our tax structure right now, there's an even amount as you go through the middle class, and then under plenty, or around that time period, you see it dip down to the top 2%, right? I would not advocate raising them above the average, but I would advocate getting them back up closer to the average. And if you look at the numbers, the last 1 to 2% are paying significantly less in their income tax than the rest of the group here, or the rest of the middle class. And that part, I think, needs to come up. But I would not advocate for bringing them higher than what the norm is. Just so we're clear about that. And that, I got that information. It's a true story in the back. I got it from our own department. The Department of Taxation puts out, and you can go online and find the same graph that I'm looking at, right? And then there's some questions about S corps and wealth producers and who are wealth producers and who's not, and I'm open for that discussion as well. But right now, I would say yes to that part of it.
Could you clarify something you just said?
Yep.
When you were showing the dip and saying raise it back up, are you talking about percentages?
Right, we're talking about percentages of their income, yes. And I'm not necessarily saying we do a flat tax because I don't know if that's a good idea, but we've got to bring it more in line. Because we've had 12 years of this not being in line, and now we're expected to fix it in just 2 years of our biennium.
And he's talking about the total tax paid as a percentage of income, and I was talking about the brackets.
Thank you.
So
Yes,
talking
yes,
about
yes, yes.
kind of apples and oranges.
Right.
All right, a couple of questions about the governor's proposal, and I suppose your reaction to the governor's proposal. One, stating that the governor's budget proposal started off reasonably progressive, but is becoming more conservative, and in particular concerns about the tobacco tax, that it affects low-income people, and then another expression of a concern about the Health and Human Services costs, which are not taxes but another part of the budget. And the second is about the governor's proposal to raise a sales tax for transit. Okay.
Read the very first sentence again, because I got stuck up on the transit tax in my head and I lost my space.
So the first is that the concern that the governor's budget is becoming more conservative.
It is. There's no doubt about it, and in some ways for good reason. The business-to-business tax was a bad idea, and I knew the minute that property tax idea came out, it was never going to fly. I walked out of the briefing where they told us, and first thing I said to my person I was talking to is, that's never going to see the floor of the House. Because the property tax relief he put forth it did not address the folks that really needed it. It gave away money to the people that didn't need it, and it didn't address property tax relief the way it should have. Yeah. The second part is the business-to-business service tax I really struggled with, not because I was concerned about what Target was going to pay in taxes, but because I was concerned about what Bob's Plumbing was going to pay in taxes, and Manoli's Pizza that's right by us over here was going to pay, and that was my concern on the service side. So, in that part, I was very concerned about it. Yeah.
But the service sales tax actually would have affected a lot of moderate income people pretty heavily. And, you know, like people who cut hair and stuff like that. I tutor, for example, and I'm only using me as an example because I know exactly how it would work for me, because it would act like an addition to my income tax bracket if there was a service sales tax on top of that. And the thing is that affects a lot of people, because there are a lot of people that do businesses like that. And it was pretty much, you know, right out of the box, kind of universally not liked very much. And the tobacco tax is one of those things where, yes, it's regressive because it does disproportionately affect poorer people, and that's just a reflection of the demographics of who smokes and who doesn't in the state. On the other hand, it's seen as kind of a user tax because it's meant to offset the cuts in the Health and Human Services budget, you know, because we have higher healthcare costs. So that's one that people kind of go philosophically back and forth, and they've gone back and forth for years. Transit tax, I'm not a big fan of sales tax generally, okay? And I'm also not a big fan of these ones that carve out a sales tax area where it just applies to this area. It seems, you know, you apply it to the metro area, it's for the metro transit, but on the other hand, a lot of people use it. There's also some concerns about where those projects will actually end up being, because historically, there's kind of a concern that a lot of metro projects have ended up on the west side of the city, that way, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten ours, you know, and so there's kind of a coalition of Ramsey County, Washington County, Dakota County people talking to each other going, wait a minute, we've got to make sure we get some of these transit projects going. And we have a particular difficulty in my half of the district. There's kind of a transit hole up the district. And I looked at the map, and I actually showed this to Charlie Zelli, the new head of the Department of Transportation. I think one of the reasons is because we're on the border between the counties, and so it always looks like it's, you know, falling off the edge of the map, and so we don't have much in the way of public transit here. If we're going to develop those jobs at the PCAP, we're going to need to have public transit so they can get there, and we need it now. There are people who live, I just talked to a lady the other day who lives in that Arden Manor, and they used to have a bus stop, and they don't have it anymore. And how are they supposed to get to jobs when they live there?
I want to add one more thing to that also. Minnesota is universally thought of as a high-tax state, right? We struggle, people talk about it. I remember as a kid, my dad talking about Minnesota being a high-tax state. I hear Republicans argue about how high-tax of a state we are, and there are some statistics that show we do have meaningfully high taxes in some ways, for sure. To which I asked, like when the chamber brings this up to me, I ask them, if that's the case, why do we have more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other state in the union? If we're so taxed and business is going to go fleeing from us, why isn't South Dakota the mecca of corporations? They dropped all the taxes like crazy to get people moving there. Their roads were empty, right? We have high taxes in some respects here, and that is a burden that we bear, but we also have incredibly good services, a wonderful environment, a crumbling but still strong education system we need to fix, and a wonderful workforce. That's the truth of the matter. And so the reality is that we cut $2.5 billion in the last 4 years from the budget. $2.5 billion. We need to make sure that we're providing for folks and invest in our education. There are very important things that I think we all want to see be successful. How we do that, I'm not sure yet. I'm still learning, and I'm open to ideas. But
we also have a tradition of community commitment to taking care of it all together. And so one of the differences between Minnesota and some other states is we don't get it as much out of fees as some states do. And so if you combine taxes and fees, Minnesota actually lands more in the middle of the pack among the states. But we kind of corporately agree that we're going to share the burden of the roads. What's the big difference between us and Illinois? They've got toll roads. We don't have toll roads. You know? We said, you know, we all need those highways. Everybody needs those highways. We're going to pay for those highways together. And, you know, that goes to a whole range of government services that we provide, that we don't tend to collect it as fees to the extent that some other places do, and so we spread it in taxes.